Hello all and welcome to our webinar today on right-of-way charging. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Simbiat Yusuf. I'm the Communications Associate here with Fourth, and I will be moderating this webinar. We hope you all are staying healthy, and we are excited to present such an engaging topic to you. Today, we'll be exploring promising models and strategies to make charging an electric car as easy as parking it. Attendees, please be sure to submit all your questions through the attendee chat. We will get through the questions at the end of the presentation today. And as a reminder, we will be sending out the presentation recording at the end of the presentation today. So please look forward to that. We'll be sending a recap email. And then for some of the newer audience, we'll start with a brief introduction of Fourth. Fourth is a nonprofit trade association. We are advocating for electric, smart, and shared mobility. We are working in four main focus area, which are industry growth and development, policy advocacy, consumer engagement, and demonstration and pilot projects. If you would like to find more information about Fourth, who we are, what we do, we ask that you find that at fourthmobility.org. And some updates on our on the EVS 33, the International Electric Vehicle Symposium and Expo, Fourth, and the EDTA, the Electric Drive Transportation Association. We are currently and closely monitoring updates from COVID-19. At this time, the symposium will be taking place as planned. If you have any questions or would like more up-to-date information, please visit the website at evs33portland.org. And we will also follow up on social media. So please follow us on our social media at EVS33 Portland to get more up-to-date information. This is going to be one ticket for two great EV conferences. The Fourth Roadmap Conference will be held in conjunction with EVS33. Fourth is supporting as a local host, and this event will be taking place on June 14th through 17th as of today. And we ask that you please use our registration code EVS33 Fourth to enjoy some VIP experience while you're there. And then on June 14th, the symposium and exposition will start with a free family-friendly event called the Public Day. It's going to be our electric transportation festival. It's going to have rider drive, access to the exhibit hall, and live entertainment. And on June 18th, we are partnering with EV Noir to present the National E-Mobility Equity Conference. This conference will explore and facilitate real conversations and strategies and best practices for engaging diverse communities often hit worse and first by air pollution. So as of today, these three events are still taking place, and we ask that you either go to fourthmobility.org or evs33portland.org to get more information. Our speakers today are Fourth's Program Manager, Erin Galiger, Michael Samulon, Senior Policy Analyst of Sustainability for the Office of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, Sarah Moore, Sustainability Program Manager at the City of Berkeley, and Jennifer Venema, Sustainability Manager at the City of Sacramento. Erin leads pilot programs and is in charging infrastructure subject matter expert. Her background is as a product manager for charging infrastructure product line, including the development and the deployment of high-power chargers. Erin grew up in Chicago and received a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Denver. Sarah Moore is the Sustainability Program Manager in the City of Berkeley's Office of Energy and Sustainable Development. She works on implementing Berkeley's climate action goals with a specific focus on incorporating green, sustainable features into buildings and advancing active and electric mobility as a means of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with transportation. She holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Illinois. Jennifer serves as the sustainability manager for the City of Sacramento's Department of Public Works. She led preparation of the city's first EV strategy and is supporting the advance of numerous EV initiatives, including Electrify America's Green Cities or SAC to Zero initiatives in Sacramento. These efforts include the launch of one of the nation's largest electric car share program. She manages the city's first curbside EV charging pilot in partnership with EVgo, which launched in California in May 2019 as the first high-powered curbside charging project in California. Her responsibilities include a range of policy and implementation effort from the city's climate action effort to renewable energy procurement. And last but not least, Michael heads up transportation electrification efforts in the Sustainability Office of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti. His focus is on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution through electrification. He has overseen the deployment of over 900 electric vehicles in the city fleet, charging infrastructure for employee, fleet and the public, and runs the city's monthly EV task force. Michael is working on long-term infrastructure planning with the LADWP, LA Metro, and the Port of Los Angeles in anticipation of a fully electrified bus fleet and good movement sector. And for the audience today, our outline will be discussing right-of-way charging best practices and lessons learned, why right-of-way charging, the barriers, and how these three cities are approaching right-of-way charging. As a reminder, we ask you all attendees to please submit all your questions through the attendee chart, keep them rolling, and at the end of all four presentations today, we will get through the questions. And with that, I am going to move it along to Erin. Erin will lay the groundwork for why right-of-way charging. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. This is Erin Galiger. I'm Program Manager with Fourth. I lead our work in the Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge. For those who are not aware of what that is, that's a program where 25 cities are trying to lower their greenhouse gas emissions to meet the Paris Agreement emissions goals. And that's through building as well as transportation. And under the transportation umbrella, Fourth is a national partner looking to increase public adoption of electric vehicles. Through that work, we've learned a lot about how to increase infrastructure in cities and other ways that to increase that adoption. One of the outputs of 2 months ago was a white paper that we have. It's right-of-way charging and how cities can lead the way. And I know that we'll be sending that out after this presentation with the recording and the slides. I wanted to first highlight that cities have always played a very active role in steering transportation methods and decisions. As I was reminded from the cities who are on this call, cities really control the right-of-way. They authorize the use, and their participation is absolutely crucial for making these decisions in the right-of-way. As you can see from these photos, it might be prioritizing bike lanes or bus rapid transit, increasing micro-mobility, but also if you're wanting to prioritize putting in charging infrastructure that is extremely visible and in the right-of-way. So why right-of-way charging? Why are we here today? The main reason is that the right-of-way sends a very clear and visible signal that EVs are coming, EVs are the future, and it really it showcases that infrastructure is available. We do know that the EV adoption rates are increasing, and around 2035, we're going to hit that crux where about 50% of car sales are EVs. Many drivers currently still charge at home, but we know that at some point we're going to start to get all of the apartment dwellers and those who do not have a garage or a driveway purchasing EVs, and they're also going to need places to charge, and the right-of-way is one of those options. So who benefits from right-of-way charging? I guess it really depends on program design, but really it's everyone who is going to not have adequate charging at home. So in the residential areas where maybe you live in a multi-unit dwelling, such as an apartment or condo, and don't have readily accessible charging infrastructure, charging in the right-of-way curbside might be a great option, as well as those drivers I was just speaking about who are without a garage or without a driveway and do not have access to a panel to have charging at home. I also wanted to highlight that TNC and taxi drivers have been a big benefactor of right-of-way charging. Those are the drivers who are going to be putting a lot of miles on their cars in a single day and may want to have that opportunity charge where when they're driving past, they're able to stop and charge up to 80% and then continue with their rides. But everyone actually benefits from the raised awareness and the raised visibility. Folks who are interested in purchasing an EV but skeptical about the amount of infrastructure that's available, they certainly benefit, as well as the folks who are maybe just getting their feet wet with electric transportation, not quite sure what it is. Seeing charging infrastructure, seeing it being used is a great tool for education and awareness. I want to also point out what the city's role is, and we'll be hearing from the cities on this call on what the role that they have played to develop their programs. I separated it out into 3 different levels. Level 1 would be like leading. You're making investments in infrastructure. You're partnering with electric utilities, putting out RFPs, and looking to manage charging in your city. You're prioritizing the space in the right-of-way for charging over other types of transportation projects, like bus rapid transit or bike lanes. The second is supporting, so a little bit lower level. If you don't have the funds available to make that investment, this would be a great way to continue enabling charging in the right-of-way. So this could be through providing incentives. This might be identifying where chargers should be going and making sure that there's clear permitting processes so that those who do apply for charging infrastructure have a better chance of getting that approved. And the third role, which is also really important, is around facilitating, bringing folks together to make sure that this is able to happen. Creating the regulatory framework and statutory framework so that charging station providers and network providers are able to participate in charging in the right-of-way. So that's also a really important role. And again, we'll hear from the folks from LA, Sacramento, and Berkeley on how they have played a role within their charging infrastructure programs. I'd be remiss if I didn't comment on the barriers to right-of-way charging. I think the big one is the prioritization of the right-of-way to charging over other infrastructure projects. Charging infrastructure is an investment, typically looking at 10 years investment. You want to put it in the ground and leave it in the ground. So making sure that when you're looking at a space that you don't have competing priorities that might come up in the future. Space is another challenge with the right-of-way charging that I've heard around. You might have trees that have been there for a while and you can't get charging in the ground. And I know that we'll see that in some of the future slides. Time and cost intensive as well as permit intensive. It's important to get all of the departments and bureaus on the same page in order to put charging infrastructure into the ground. Ownership decisions can be a challenge as well because the city owns the right-of-way. Making sure that third-party ownership of chargers can also work, and developing those franchise agreements. Another challenge would be around advertising in the right-of-way. A lot of cities do not allow any advertising in the right-of-way, so any type of advertisement on a charger can be considered advertising and might be restrictive on certain business models. And lastly, I wanted to cover some of our recommendations and best practices. So the first one is program design, making sure you're pre-selecting areas where chargers can go and balancing that parking and charging demands in that area so that specific areas are not now 100% EV parking and nothing left for folks who currently drive internal combustion engine vehicles. That can be pretty contentious for the population. Creating a clear permitting process is also really important. Outlining it and making sure that it's really clear and obvious for folks who are going to be going through that process, incorporate public opinion into that process. That is going to lead to greater success and more positive application process. The third is signage and enforcement, making sure it's really clear on who can park there, how long they can charge, what the cost of charging is, so that folks who are driving their EVs aren't just parking but not charging, and keeping the flow. And then the fourth would be technology. Work with your utility to make sure that where you're siting charging infrastructure, there's available capacity or the ability to bring in that additional capacity at a lower cost. And also right-sizing your charging infrastructure. This goes for right-of-way or not in the right-of-way, but making sure you're choosing the right charger for the right application. Maybe a DC fast charger works great when there's a high turnaround and a lot of drivers coming by, but it probably isn't great if someone's going to be parked there for 8 hours overnight. So picking that right technology will be a great way to make sure that the program is a success. So that's all the slides I have. I do want to pass it on to the cities that we have on the call so that they can share their best practices and lessons learned, and speak to how they design their programs. You can find more information on the work that we're doing through the Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge, as well as the link to our white paper on our website, fourthmobility.org. Thank you.
Thank you for your great presentation, Erin. And now I will pass it along to Sarah, who will speak on the Berkeley's residential curbside EV charging pilot program.
Thanks so much. Can you confirm that everyone can hear me? Can I be heard right now? Okay, yes. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Yes, I am excited to share an example from Berkeley. Just for those who don't know, Berkeley's in California. We've got a population of about 122,000. And as you can see from this picture, we're pretty built out and we're pretty landlocked. We've got the bay on one side, hills on the other, and neighboring communities on both other sides. In our community, as is true of many others, home charging is really the preferred place to charge. It offers the most convenience, it often is the most economical, and sometimes there are some barriers to doing so. The picture on the left, I just included because this is kind of the ideal situation where you've got in this case, both a garage and a driveway. Just wanted to point out that when we first started work in this area, we actually did a lot to streamline the permitting for someone who lives in a house like you see to the left, and specifically that was to allow for installation of an EV charging station to allow someone to charge while parked in their driveway. Initially that had to get both a zoning permit as well as a building permit, and we streamlined that and made it a building permit only, just a simple electrical permit that is available just over the counter or through an online application. Then our City Council was also really interested in addressing the issue to the right. This is not an example of a charging station permitted through our program. This is one that our community has a few of. They're not always this pretty, but I think most of your communities have this as well. This is someone who either lacks off-street parking or elects not to use it and instead wraps a cord through tree branches or tunnels it onto the sidewalk or does something of the sort to allow for charging while parked on the street. And the program I'm about to tell you about gives a safe, legal alternative to that type of charging, which is not a type that we endorse at the City of Berkeley. So the Curbside Residential Charging Pilot Program launched in December 2014, and its mission is to allow residents who lack off-street parking a means of charging at home. So through this pilot program, those who truly lack off-street parking can qualify either to create a new space on their private property, and that's actually prioritized, or install a curbside charging station. In either of those cases, it's the property owner who finances and controls use of the charging station. Originally, when it rolled out, we had the 11th hour project funding, a grant to cover the permit fees, but now that is all borne by the applicant. Applicants must use commercially available charging stations. Installing just an outlet alone is not permitted through this pilot. And for those who qualify for curbside, the street parking remains available to all types of vehicles and any vehicle. So it is not designated just for the property owner who installed the charging station, nor is it designated just for electric vehicles. So far, and as I said, this launched in December 2014 and has been extended once, now is extended through the end of this year. We've had 61 applications, and of those applications, 9 qualified for on-site charging, and nearly half of those did install, 4 of those installed. 35 qualified for curbside charging. Much fewer of those have installed, and I will get into some details on that soon. And then some were simply not eligible. And typically the ones that were not eligible were residents who actually have on the books legal off-street parking, but either due to its slope or its width or something else, they don't use it and had hoped to get curbside instead. Depending on whether you qualify for an on-site charging EV space or a curbside charging space, the permitting mechanisms are a little different, as shown there to the right. But we did, for this pilot, use permitting mechanisms that were already in place. So for the curbside charging, it's a minor encroachment permit followed by an engineering and electrical permit. I'm going to show you some examples of actual installations through this pilot. This is an example of an on-site charging. So look at the lawn area there to the left, and you'll see it's transformed into an area for charging. It's very hard to see the charging station itself, but it's installed there at the side of the porch. Here's an example of curbside. This is the house before the installation and after. The other thing shown on this slide is an example of the sticker that is placed on these types of charging stations that works to give the public some more information about what it is. Here's another example of a house before an installation and then after the installation of the curbside charging station. And as you can see, both of these examples, the applicants elected to use a charging station that was integrated inside a locking cabinet. That was their choice. The pilot does require that the cord at a minimum has to be secured, and these applicants elected to use this one to give more protection against vandalism and the like. Here, though, is a final example of a curbside station that used a different type of charging station. As far as what we found and what we're going to do next, overall, there was a lot of interest in this pilot, actually, both within our community and from communities really all over North America. So we've had lots of calls and emails and the like over the years. But then locally, as I said, a lot of interest, but relatively few installations. And primarily that really comes down to the expense. Applicants found that their estimates for purchase and installation range from $5,000 to $20,000. Most that installed spent about $10,000 to do so. So it's an expensive undertaking. Some applicants had concerns about their ability to access the charging station. They had to have reasonable knowledge of what parking behaviors are on their street and knowledge of whether they would be likely to have access with the frequency they would need to charge their vehicle. We also discovered a variety of issues related to placement over the time of this pilot program. So street trees really was an issue that we did not foresee initially, but we were lucky to be able to bring someone from our forestry department on board as we reviewed these applications, and when we went out for site visits, we wanted to make sure both that we protected existing street trees, and at times we also wanted to retain locations that were ideal for future street trees and move the charging station to a different area to allow for that. Of course, we also wanted to make sure that whenever possible, these charging stations could serve more than one street parking space, so that use would be, or access to use would be maximized. We also discovered that we needed to give more guidance about conduit in the public right-of-way. Typically in Berkeley, the public right-of-way extends to 2 feet behind the back of sidewalk, and from the city's perspective, we wanted that conduit to be minimized. Any turns or the like that needed to happen, we wanted that to be on the private property side, and we just wanted a straight shot back from the charging station back to the parking lot in the public right-of-way. This pilot actually does allow an option for public use, but if an applicant takes that on, they also have to assure ADA accessibility, which adds more expense in most cases to have a ramp up to the sidewalk and height and whatnot that allows for that. And so typically that and other reasons, the applicants who have taken part in this pilot have elected to do so just for personal use of the charging station. And then just for this pilot as well as others, there's an implicit sort of assumption that street parking in that location is going to continue. And I think the other speakers will get into it as well, but there are a variety of competing uses and interests in the curbside. And so that is also an important consideration. So moving forward, we need to decide by the end of this year and take a proposal to City Council on what to do with this pilot, whether to continue it, to alter it, expand it. And we're going to do so in light of the Berkeley Electric Mobility Roadmap, a plan that we've been working on for the last 15 months, and we'll be taking to City Council hopefully still later this month. But this roadmap really has 4 large goals. One is equity and access to electric mobility, and then improving alternatives to driving, achieving zero net carbon, and demonstrating city leadership. And with that idea of equity and access to electric mobility, we're interested in looking at opportunities to potentially expand and alter this program so that it can serve more of our residents and visitors. And with that, I'm going to share information about how to contact me and how to find out more information about this pilot program and turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Sarah. And now we'll hear from Jennifer, who will highlight the curbside electric vehicle charging in Sacramento.
Thank you. This is Jennifer. Can you hear me? I just had, there's yard folks that have arrived. Great, you can hear me. So good morning. Pardon the background noise. This is new for the Corona era. So just send a chat if the background noise is too loud and I will relocate again. So I am from the City of Sacramento. You can see a picture of our waterfront and the central city here. We are a community of approximately 500,000 people. For those of you that don't know, we are the capital city of California. You can see on the map here our central city, and what this image is showing is the mapping exercise we did to look at opportunity areas for curbside charging, with those areas in green identifying places we saw as having the highest opportunity. But when we're talking about curbside charging for Sacramento, why are we doing this and what's our approach? It's a little bit of a different rationale and approach than what you just heard described for City of Berkeley by Sarah. So in Sacramento, we're really focused on use of the right-of-way. We're very focused on how we can maximize access for the greatest number of individuals. And Sacramento is primarily, by and large, a government town with more middle-income families. And in terms of the types of people that would have capital to invest in the right-of-way to increase use, we really saw a greater opportunity for our community to provide public curbside charging that could serve our multifamily users, our renters, and also the large population of commuters and employees that come into and out of the city every day. We have over 100,000 people that come into the city for work on a daily basis when not in the pandemic. And so what you can see on the map is where we thought the first pass there'd be opportunity. Now, Sacramento is a very old city, so there's a lot in the right-of-way. And what you can see in blue, all the streets we thought there's potentially opportunity, but recognize it would really take site-specific work to figure out how much opportunity there would be. So in terms of our context in the city, what's also unique is we've had a lot of momentum for EV programs and investments over the last few years. For those of you that don't know, Erin did mention this. Symbiot did mention this, but we were selected as Electrify America's first green city for a number of SAC to Zero investments, as we call them, which include the launch of over 300 all-electric car share vehicles throughout the city. 260 of those are available to the general public, not specific apartment dwellers. Those would be the black Chevy Bolts in the upper right-hand corner through a service that's operated by Gig Car Share. But then we've also had years and years of investment from our utility, the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, in terms of vehicle incentives and charging infrastructure incentives. And we have a lot of interesting programs, including the Sacramento Air Quality Management District's Our Community Car Share, the first low-income EV car share program launched in the state. So those are all the range of users we have. It's private drivers to public drivers using shared vehicles. Initially started this as a pilot. We were approached by EVgo right at the time as we were starting to explore learnings from Berkeley and Los Angeles and other cities, and came together and decided to move forward on our first pilot in the right-of-way with EVgo through a pilot partnership approach to really use it as a learning. So the intent was to do the project, learn from it, create citywide guidance for future permitting, which we actually drafted, we vetted, we shared that. However, as we were moving forward, we began to learn how hard it was just to get the first project done in the right-of-way with an amazing partner, with everyone on the same page. As has been mentioned, the right-of-way is challenging for a number of reasons. I'll touch on those. But based on that process, we decided that really the best bang for our buck, recognizing the amount of staff time, the amount of partnership investment required, would be to move forward with a more targeted approach, recognizing that city involvement was really key for these public curbside chargers to work, to site them, to vet them, to sell them to the community, and that we really needed the right partner that could be on board to operate it and see its success. We had real hesitation to create a citywide process that very few would benefit from if these were private infrastructure installations, and that would require a lot of staff time for us to support, which we didn't have a mechanism to recover. So we are at this point moving forward. I'm going to touch on the pilot we are implementing with EVgo. And for the next phase, rather than doing citywide permitting, we have released a request for proposals. That was in late December 2019. And through that, we were looking to select the next partner to operate the second wave of public curbside charging installations. And we did choose EVgo as that partner, and we are working with them to site the next phase currently. But first, the first pilot we did undertake was at Southside Park. This is our curbside charging plaza. EVgo has been a phenomenal partner. I believe we've got a representative on the call if there's questions for EVgo. And what you can see here are 4 of the 6 chargers. These are in the right-of-way angled parking spots. These chargers are high power. We have 3 150 kilowatt chargers, 3 50 kilowatt chargers. So there's an entirely separate dedicated transformer. We've got a big equipment pad and plenty of space at the park. And that's something to note. In the right-of-way, there's not a lot of space for stuff like this. So the project was feasible because of the location at a park. And this is sited right in our central corridor, just north of the highway where a lot of traffic comes on and off. It's right next to a lot of multifamily housing. There's a lot of activity as well. We have the weekend farmers markets, and a lot of special events happening here. This launched in May of 2019. We've had nearly 7,000 charging sessions to date, with over 4 charges for sessions per charger per day. We've had over 700 unique vehicles that have used the project and nearly 500,000 electric miles powered to date. We expect these numbers are a little bit higher. But what I want to note is that the project, in order to get this launched, when we started it, as I noted, that our focus was really on how we could get the maximum benefit from the effort, recognizing the city didn't have money to invest. We didn't have the willingness or the capacity to operate it. We needed a vetted partner that could succeed. What we had to offer was the access, was literally the land. And I think that is one of the greatest assets we bring as local governments. So EVgo's role is to own and operate the infrastructure. For this project, they have a 10-year license to do so. They're responsible for the equipment. The city and EVgo work together to conduct outreach, to site, to vet to the design, and we're there to support with outreach. And the role of our utility was really more limited and traditional in the sense of permitting, providing the service to EVgo. And they did work with us to recognizing what a priority this was for the city. And I think the city involvement was key to ensure this could happen within some of our time constraints. So what we did learn going through is even with some of the brightest minds and with all of these key stakeholders involved throughout, this is hard work and it's expensive work, as you heard before. The cost for this project ended up being much higher than anticipated. And originally, the expectation and the plan, the permits showed this. We had this as a fully ADA accessible project. However, in the midst of project construction, despite all of our best efforts, you can see this tree in the before picture ended up being the culprit, really putting city goals up against one another. We have a very strict tree preservation code, and at the point that the arborists realized that the project and the ADA pieces couldn't go in without killing the tree, all the electrical equipment and conduit had already been laid. So we had to learn the hard way, and the city had to bite the bullet, and essentially EVgo worked with us very closely to essentially we had to remove the ramp and the accessible paths of travel in order to make this project happen within the deadlines so that the funding wasn't lost. And it got in. We've constructed it. we've seen what's worked. However, what we know is going forward, ADA for the City of Sacramento is very key. And for the next round of projects, they are being designed to include those accessible paths of travel, the appropriate van width, which again is hard in the right-of-way because you start to lose more parking spaces, but it's a balance we think is key, especially in Sacramento, where we have been a lot of litigation against the city that has been successful in terms of accessibility. We're very sensitive to this. What you can see on the slide here are the next 2 sites we have lined up for the second phase of curbside pilots. The plan is to go in for 3 active charging spaces at each of these sites. These will have 350 kilowatt chargers at each space and the ramp, van accessible spaces. So we're working, and here one of the lessons we've learned again, even after the first project, is this stuff gets tricky with all the electrical equipment. So we had preliminary information from our utility, but once we all were further along and EVgo had progressed in the design, it became clear that in terms of the pole-mounted transformer, which saves space in the right-of-way, there's additional requirements and limitations that weren't anticipated, which meant we had to regroup in terms of EVgo had to decide to switch the type of equipment that they're using in the right-of-way. So it's slightly bigger models, and we're working together to figure out how to make those more of a visual amenity and looking at the incorporation of public art in those particular pieces of equipment for the next phase. But I think the real takeaway is that this is hard, even when you've done it before, when we know a lot of the issues to be watching for. There's always something new. So this is in process for the second phase. Another lesson we learned is that it's really key to start the engagement early, and in the siting of these locations, we did pick these to serve the maximum types of users and those use cases. So these are near downtown coffee shops, near multifamily housing, near commercial corridors, and I think that these are only going to penetrate further into our dense urban neighborhoods. We're very excited. We've conducted at this point 2 open houses. We've been going to the neighborhood associations. We've been going to other events to really try and promote these. We've done noticing throughout the neighborhood, and I think that is one of the key takeaways as well. For us, it's been important to show that public-private partnership, both the city's role and support, but that we have an expert operator on board here to see the project succeed. That concludes my presentation. We have some resources online. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And now, last but not least, we'll hear from Michael, who will cover the City of Los Angeles. And audience, please keep the questions coming. We will get to them shortly. I know some of the questions will be answered intermittently with the presentations, but we are collecting those questions and we will answer them shortly. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to assume you can hear me like you did with Sarah and Jennifer. Thank you to Fourth, Erin, and then my co-city colleagues, Sarah and Jennifer. Great to be on the webinar today. I'm going to just start by saying ditto to all of the complications and things that have been brought up already in Berkeley and Sacramento, so that'll help me breeze through some of what we've got going on here. Just a very quick background, and I am going to try keeping this quick because I see there's a lot of questions coming in, and there's about 15 minutes left. I don't seem to be able to advance the slides. There we go. Great. So just very briefly background. The the picture on the left there is our updated carbon pathway to get to carbon neutral by 2050. The blue and red sections at the bottom are basically building related things, which through our utility, we have a municipal utility here in LA going to all renewables or carbon free, will largely help with that, which leaves the big complication of the sort of yellow bar there, transportation, which is what we're here to talk about. And we can advance to the next slide. Great, thank you. So Just very quickly from our 2019 updated sustainability plan, you'll see I'm pointing to the first goal there, increase the percentage of electric and zero emission vehicles in the city to 25% by 2025, 80% by 2035, and 100% by 2050. These are big goals. We have a lot of cars in Los Angeles. Of course, we're known for our congestion and our smog, although these COVID times have indeed been helping with that. But just by way of background, we've got about 1.6 million vehicles registered in the city and in the county, because really we are just a large agglomeration, 7.7 million, something like that. So the amount of vehicles coming through at all times are a lot, and we need to do everything we can to help make it easier for folks to go electric and go zero emission. So that means we're throwing everything in the kitchen sink to get to our goals, which includes right-of-way charging, what we're here to talk about today. And so moving to the next slide. Just going to talk briefly about three programs that we currently have going, and then an upcoming program. You'll see the image right there is one of our street light chargers being attached, which is exciting. So our Bureau of Street Lighting has the bulk of our curbside chargers. LADWP, our municipal utilities, got about 45 power pole chargers as well. And then we've got our low-income EV car share, Blue LA, that hopefully folks have heard of, that has at this point about 180 charge points, around 35 stations, and 100 cars. So moving on to the next slide. So quickly, our Bureau of Street Lighting has been able to put in around 340 chargers. They're going to be putting in another, hopefully 80. That was supposed to happen sort of by the end of the fiscal year. As is the case with most folks, things are rapidly changing. So we'll see what is and is not possible. I believe they're funded, so I'm hoping the money's not going to go away, but this is where we are right now. You can see in the images, we currently have 4 different models that we've been testing out, varying numbers of each of them, but ChargePoint there on the left, that was the first one that went in. That was installed in early 2015. So this program is about 5 years old now and has ramped significantly. I think we had a handful of chargers for the first year or so, and then installed about 30 towards the end of that first year, and then it's been sort of 50 for a couple of years, and then 150 last year, and intended to be at another 150 this year. Normally, we do charge a fee for these for use of these chargers. That fee varies depending on where it is, if a meter was removed, if it's in a sort of like downtown or a heavy commercial area versus a more residential area. We're using rates between $1 and $3. We may be changing that to a kilowatt hour based fee to be determined, but that's what it looks like we're doing. At the moment, though, we have made all of these chargers free. So during this coronavirus period, we wanted to make sure that folks who needed access to charging would be able to get that. So we were able to work with all our partners here and get all the fees. So we have the fee that we implement, and then there's of course a fee to use your card or your RFID or whatever, charged by the smart system. So yeah, anyway, those are free right now. And then just very briefly, Equity Lens. So part of the program is that these are installed across all council districts. We have 15 city council districts here in LA. We install an equal number in all of them. What this does is de facto make a more equitable distribution of EV chargers. We have many disadvantaged neighborhoods in Los Angeles that, just to be frank, a normal commercial private sector operator would not install a charger there at the moment because they don't see the business case. And what this has allowed us to do is make sure that chargers are being installed in areas where they normally wouldn't be installed. Quick statistics there, we've had over 60,000 sessions to date, and actually it's probably quite a bit more than that. One of these systems I wasn't able to pull the data from, so it could be another 5,000 or 10,000 sessions on top of that. 577,000 kilowatt hours, so lots of e-miles being done, which is great. And let's move to the next slide, please. So just quickly, we have them mapped. The map on the left there is our ESRI map that we provide. So that's public data that anyone can get if they go to the city's open portal. We know that most EV users are not on the city's open data portal. So we also have all of our chargers in PlugShare, which you can see on the right there. Unfortunately, at the moment, you can't look them up specifically by the city, but if you look up some of the networks that we have, you'll find them pretty quickly. Moving to the next slide. So the Department of Water and Power similarly said, hey, we've got these assets in the ground already, don't need to do a whole heck of a lot of trenching or anything of that nature. Let's figure out how to use them. And they have been able to install around 45 chargers on the power poles. I don't want to speak for the department, but my understanding is that these have been more challenging than anticipated originally, and that's because these poles are multi-purpose. Somebody needs to be able to, a lineman needs to be able to walk up them, do work on it. So once you start adding a bunch of infrastructure to it, you really need to be careful. So actually the picture in the middle there, you can see, there's a fairly large meter pedestal that has to get installed as well. And then of course the actual power pole, which is that sort of smaller conduit coming down the side there. So needless to say, things are still more challenging than anticipated, but this is a system that can be made to work. And let's go to the next slide. So unique challenges and opportunities. As you can see, vandalism is pretty regular. So that picture in the middle, that's just graffiti. That's normal. Where we anticipated that. That's, if you put anything into the public right of way, you're going to get that. What we didn't anticipate at the beginning was what you see on the left there, the charger that has been cut. So people just, having fun. The picture on the right there is just an image of the install, and the sort of, I think what I want to highlight is maybe the main benefit to doing these street light and power pole installations is that there's essentially minimal infrastructure work that needs to get done. So everything that Jennifer talked about for curbside with DC fast chargers, and when you install, and have to break concrete, you sort of mitigate that. So, you just get to tap into the lines that are right there. Locally, at least in LA, we also didn't have to do any extra permitting because the poles themselves are already permitted. So there were no new permits that needed to get pulled. So that just meant, ensuring that there's power on the line and getting these chargers installed. One very quick sort of smart cities story to speak to on the streetlight piece of this is these are all high voltage lines that used to have, high pressure sodium or metal halide lights that used a lot of electricity on them. And over the last 10 or 12 years, the department has swapped out pretty much all of those to LEDs. And that spare capacity that was created is what allowed these chargers to be installed. So moving to the next slide, please. Blue LA, very quickly, you can see a sense in the picture there of these installations. They're a little bit different. You've got 5 pedestal chargers installed in the ground, concrete trenching work happening. There's also a kiosk, so in reality, there's 6 pieces of infrastructure that need to be installed. Very quick background. We've got 36 stations in the ground, 34 currently energized. As you can see there, the service is suspended currently because of coronavirus, and we wanted to make sure that we would only have them out there if we could provide a safe situation. So we've got about 180 chargers, around 100 vehicles, and we're very excited. You can see in these membership numbers, this is a low-income based program, and about 50% of the members are low-income disadvantaged neighborhood residents. So we're really hitting what we wanted to do. We've had over 900,000 miles driven to date. You can see the kilowatt hours there. Lots of use. So we're very excited with where this is going and how it's been working. Unique challenges, absolutely. In this case, we actually have 2 utilities that need to be attached, both a power utility and a telecom. That's double trouble. So I'm going to just refer back to everything that Jennifer and Sarah said. Quickly, if we can just go to the next slide. So we are working on a new curbside pilot program to allow private sector companies to come in and install in the right of way. What I didn't mention earlier is that all of those other programs the city is either directly doing or we're partnered on, like Blue LA. Currently, we don't have a mechanism to allow private companies to come in and do this. So we are in the midst of that. We actually had been given direction by council to go ahead and draft the rules and guidelines, which I think we're supposed to come up at the end of this month, but that's probably not going to happen at this point. We're going to have a pilot zone in every council district. We are focusing on multifamily and commercial areas because in LA, pretty much all of our single-family residential homes have driveways, so we don't need to focus as much on that. And ultimately, we want to have a one-stop shop, which is a sort of portal online, probably run through our Los Angeles Department of Transportation, where almost everything can be done, all your permits, all of that kind of stuff. Maybe the utility work, you still need to go to DWP. But I'm going to stop there.
Thank you so much, Michael. And now we will get to Q&A. I know we've received a lot of questions regarding pricing, from pricing of the charger, the installation, and then pricing to consumers when charging the station. So I will open this question to all of our presenters today. Were the pilots funded, and also in turn, how are the consumers getting charged for this? And with the case of different charging stations, how are they being billed? And in the case of Sarah for Sacramento, if you can speak to how the public are responding to the private charging. Are the public allowed to use the private chargers? So I will open it up and let Sarah go first.
Sure. In the case of Berkeley's residential pilot program, the costs are borne by the property owner. The city, has created the framework for the pilot program. Initial expenses in developing that pilot were financed through a grant, and now the permitting fees cover any city expenses. So it's really the cost of both installation, maintenance, all of that is borne by the applicant. And all of the applicants to date have done installs just for personal use. So they are connected to their home electrical panels, their electrical systems, and they're paying, for the electricity just with their regular utility bill as they use.
And this is Jennifer. In Sacramento for the Southside Park project, those are owned and operated by EVgo, so the public would access it just like they would any other EVgo charger. So EVgo did invest in all the capital expenses, all the operating expenses. There was no direct city funding for the project. We provided staff time to support in the siting and supporting through permitting, but they also, EVgo is responsible for receiving and paying for securing all the permits that were necessary for the right-of-way. So that's administered by our Public Works Department, and they had to also get permits through SMUD.
Yeah, for LA, the city owns and operates the streetlight and power pole chargers, and we are in a partnership with Blue LA for the Blue LA car shares, alongside funding from CARB, as well as funding from the city, and then Blue LA.
Thank you. And there was a lot of questions also about the role of the local utilities. And I know you, Michael, spoke on your last slide about dealing with two different utilities. So for the other cities, what roles do you see the utility plays, and what roles can the utilities play in organizing or getting the projects up on the ground?
This is Sarah in Berkeley. You want to go ahead, Jennifer? Okay.
No, go for it.
So this is Sarah in Berkeley. We have an investor-owned utility, Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, and so they were the only utility in the game when we initially started this pilot, and now more recently we also have a CCA, East Bay Community Energy, which is a local provider of electricity. So our program has not involved the utilities much realistically at this point, because it is this private residential-based program. But as we look at future opportunities, I think we've definitely got opportunities to work more directly with our utilities to look at opportunities for altering or expanding our program.
And I'll add very quickly, for Sacramento, SMUD was a supportive partner helping us to get this through the process in a timely fashion for the next phase of curbside charging. I'll just note for other cities, as state rebates come in California through Cali VIP, keep in mind that in Sacramento, our understanding is that was the first time Cali VIP program specifically allowed for rebates to cover curbside chargers, because of some of the work that we've been doing locally. So it's something to think about. There might be state rebates to help with the costs, but SMUD was not interested in owning or operating in the right-of-way. They are supporting from another role.
I'll just add that I think utilities can play a strong role in helping advise the location of chargers. Some locations might be more cost effective than others as far as bringing in that additional power capacity that's necessary, especially for like a DC fast charger. So having that discussion early and being able to vet a couple different locations might help lower overall cost of the installation.
Thank you. And then I had a question. There was a question presented about if cities have considered, or if you three cities have considered solar chargers that are not attached to the grid and they won't need the trenching, if that's been a consideration, or as we're going into the next steps of all of these pilots. Anyone can.
This is Michael. I'll jump in quickly on that. I have not been presented with any curbside solar charger. Happy to look at one if someone's got one, but we have not actively pursued anything of that nature.
And I'll just add, with tree canopy and a lot of buildings, not clear how well they would work in our right-of-way, but similarly, we haven't been approached with any of those solutions in Sacramento.
Nothing to add from Berkeley on that either.
Okay, thank you.
I'll add that I have seen the use of, or at least a program designed for solar curbside chargers in the city of Charlotte. It has not kicked off just yet, but I know that they're looking to place them around the city and start to see where there is greater uptake before they do a full installation of chargers. So kind of an interesting way to test out if the charging station has any, I guess, interest from other drivers. Yeah, I think it's a pretty neat program, but the other thing is that it's quite expensive for those solutions.
Yeah, and we will do one final question, and we this is going to be in regards to the current climate. How are cities responding to EV charging installation and associated transportation electrification plans with regards to COVID-19 and the future economic impacts? And I know, Michael, you stated that you've suspended in LA, the blue car LA, and if any of the cities, Jennifer, Sarah, you can speak more about how COVID is affecting plans and how economic impact can, how should we start considering those things now?
I think we just are expecting it might slow our permitting process a bit, but in Sacramento, we're not expecting it's going to stop the forward momentum of our next phase of pilots.
And in Berkeley, I would say similarly, it's slowing. Obviously, our attention right now is on direct response, and in our city as well as I think both LA and Sacramento, that includes a lot of looking at vulnerable populations, including our unhoused populations. So a lot of city attention is appropriately going to that right now. Other things realistically are being postponed at the moment, but you know, we, as the other cities on this call, have strong climate commitments, are looking to get to carbon neutrality, and see electric mobility as an important part of that work.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. And as you can see, we are running out of time, but here are the information, the contact information for our speakers today. We will send a recap email, and please feel free if we did not get to your question. We want to keep the conversation going. So we will have an email sent out shortly to you all. And I want to thank all of our speakers today for a great presentation. And we hope you are able to join us on April 21st, Tuesday, April 21st, where we will discuss the unique roles cities play in advancing transportation electrification. We will be joined again by Erin, Ford's program manager. We'll also be joined by the City of Denver, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and also NRDC to speak on the unique roles cities play. And with that, I want to say thank you. Expect an email from Ford in regards to webinar recap and more information about the webinar with additional resources and reading material. And I would like to say thank you, closing it off, and you all have a wonderful day and stay healthy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.